Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar interview. I'm Francis Sealey from GlobalNet 21, and these are one of the many interviews that we do over a period of time where we look at people who have new ideas and who are making a difference. And just over a week ago, we held a meeting in the House of Commons that looked at whether university education is fit for purpose and whether there is a discontinuity between what students expect and what's being offered. Well, we're going to carry this through tonight, and we've got Lord Knight of Weymouth, Jim Knight, I'm sure he likes to be called Jim, and he's going to join us, and I hope Rox Walters will join us as well, but from Education Beyond Borders, but she's not with us yet. But we've got Jim Knight, and that really is great. Before I start, let me say, if you are on this system, and on the webinar itself, please feel free to type in questions in the panel where I just typed in hi there, and put comments or questions. If you're following us on Facebook, on the stream on there, put it in the comment box below and we'll try and follow it. Anyhow, Jim, thanks for joining us, and I hope Rox will join us in a minute. Maybe first it might be a good idea for you to just tell us a bit about yourself and why you have this passion about education, and especially education in the new digital world that we're all living in now.
Well, thanks, Francis, and it's a delight to join you. Well, I guess I was on my third career, having been had a career in theatre and in a very dull time selling telephone directories whilst being a local politician. But in my third career, I was a member of parliament, and after a year as a minister at DEFRA, Tony Blair rang me up and asked me to be schools minister, and that really ignited a passion and a love of education, which doesn't really go away. I started my day today with the General Secretary of the National Association of Head Teachers, who had run a couple of other trade unions before he ran this education union, and he said the same thing. This is a passion that will never leave him now, because you're essentially working with professionals who are creating the future, who are changing children's lives and nurturing the next generation, and that is infectious, and that's now the driving passion that I've had in the intervening 13 years. I did have a year out as employment minister in Gordon Brown's cabinet in 2009-10, but that did allow me to connect the dots between what we do in education and what happens in the labour market, and has meant that I've got an interest that extends from what the Americans call K through 12 education into skills and adult learning and through into universities.
Okay.
And its relationship then to the labour market.
Okay, I see we've got Rox on with us now, and I hope we can hear her. Can you hear us, Rox?
I can hear you both, Francis.
Okay, that's great. Well, can you tell us about your passion for education? Why did you get involved in Education Beyond Borders? What is behind your real interest in this?
I actually come from a family of long line of educators. So my dad taught in the Polytechnic from where I'm from. My uncle was the Minister of Education in Barbados, and we've always had very strong views about education that I've grown up with. Most members of my family came to the UK to study one subject or the other, and they're very proud of having studied here in the UK, returned home to set up our education system back at home. Barbados does have a university, the University of the West Indies. And we've always understood that it's very important to be educated so that you can be productive members of your society. I was quite excited to come here to study architecture for lots of reasons. And it's just always impacted on me what a massive opportunity. There's so many different universities, so many different subjects you can study here in the UK. There's so many opportunities that are available to you. Some people say if you want them, you can have them.
Okay, let's go on, else we won't get through the whole set of questions, which I think, we've got a lot of things, I think, that interest people. So I mean, we had a meeting in the House of Commons, and a lot of the students there showed a lot of dissatisfaction to the way universities are going in terms of diversity, in terms of safe space and many other issues. I mean, you know, given your own experience, Jim, is this something that you can understand or you can connect with?
Sorry, can you just repeat that question?
I mean, there seemed at the meeting in the House of Commons that many students were dissatisfied with what was being offered.
Oh, yes. So I connect with that dissatisfaction entirely, and I do so with some humility as the person who was the Minister of Schools for 3 years, and so to an extent my fingerprints are all over the education system if they were educated here in England. And yet I now see a school system and a wider education system that's no longer fit for purpose. I think we are living through dynamic times where we have new technology that is opening up access to information, and you could argue knowledge, and certainly a system that's still based around knowledge transfer rather than knowledge discovery and knowledge creation, is one that is out of date. And I have a great passion and connect with others around the world in my desire to try and change it and shift the paradigm on somewhat.
And, you know, Rox, you were at that meeting, and is that something you identify with what Jim has just said? Many students were talking about, you know, universities should not just be about jobs, they should be about knowledge transfer, development of ideas, personal development. And do you see universities as going away from that, and we should go back a little?
Yes, I mean, like I said, I think I mentioned to you earlier before, we have about 3,000 students in our network. And I hear from lots of students during the week, and they do express those kinds of views. The fact that they're looking for an education that you can take anywhere with you in the world, or that you can deal with the challenges that are coming up in the job market, or just in your future career. And there are many of those. So yes, there is that discontent being voiced.
And Francis, let me just add one other thing, which is what I observe from employers, and you know, I talk to employers regularly, is that they're starting to use new technologies, essentially what you might call talent analytics, in order to sift rather than qualifications. And the value to employers of qualifications is starting to erode. And that in turn raises some quite big challenges for universities, who are part of making students indebted. And if the return on investment for that debt is a qualification that then isn't worth as much, then we start to have some problems. And that's another reason why I see a need to drive some significant and rapid reform in the way our universities work.
Well, maybe we could look at those reforms in a minute, but you know, you talked about, in a way, the new market and the new age reflecting what universities must do but are not doing. But you know, we found recently in a survey in universities that arts and humanity figures have gone down. There are not many people coming in as there used to be, and all the people are moving towards STEM subjects, you know, maths and science and so on. I mean, and that suggests that students are looking upon universities as a conveyor belt for jobs, and all the things about our cultural heritage and history are beginning to suffer. And that really sort of devalues universities, doesn't it, Jim?
It certainly does. And education shouldn't be as transactional as that. You know, whilst on the one hand, I'm arguing that we need to align our education system more squarely with what the labour market needs, that doesn't mean we go down ever narrower silos laden with qualification and having to go even deeper into, you know, beyond bachelors into masters and PhDs just in order to get ahead in the jobs market. That's not the answer, because when, again, you know, I speak to employers. I even spoke to the president of the Royal Society. You couldn't get a more established scientist than the Nobel Prize winner, who is now running the Royal Society, saying that our education system is too siloed. Because if he wants to develop more Nobel Prize winning science, he needs more than scientists. He needs, you know, this is the era of the polymath. This is the era where you need not only to understand the science, but you need to understand the society and the behaviors within that society so that you can successfully land that science. And that demands the humanities and it demands the arts.
Yes, I remember James Lovelock talking in his book Gaia about science being siloed as well, and education helps to generate those silos. But Rox, I mean, do you think one of the problems that we have is that we try to get universities to do everything? I mean, Tony Blair's vision of 50% of people going to universities has created a situation which is unsustainable in a way, and it reduces those who don't go to university to almost second-class citizens.
There is definitely that issue, and more importantly, or overwhelmingly for the student, is the faculty tuition fees. You know, a British student is looking at an investment of at least £50,000. An international student, if they come to study here, are looking easily at £200,000 to study. That's a lot to ask any student to invest in, many times going into debt, to not have any kind of security of a guaranteed job, for want of a better word, at the end of it. And unfortunately, that is the real issue, that is the real pressure, that is the real student angst. Right now, we all value going to university, and it's great to be exposed to so many things in the world, but just can't afford that debt and 3 or 4 years without some kind of certainty of a job.
And just to chime in, Francis, on that, I was recently talking to a family friend who has just finished his master's at Imperial, having studied physics at Oxford, but he's from Wales, so the Welsh government paid 2/3 of his tuition fee, so it's less than his English friends. But I didn't ask him about how much his debt is as a big sum. I just said, what's the repayment look like? And his repayment regime is 9% for everything he earns between about 21 and 26 grand, and 15% of income for everything he earns over 26. So for everything over 26 grand, he'll pay 20% tax, he'll pay 13% national insurance, and he'll pay 15% loan repayment, making a marginal tax rate of 48%. That is unsustainable. It is just simply not fair.
And is that why, Rox, that many young people are saying, you know, because it's not sustainable, university is not cost effective for me. I can do better. I can get a better income if I do something else.
Yes, absolutely. That is the nut of the issue there, I think, from the feedback we have from the students in our network. Absolutely.
And one commentator has asked a question. He's saying that universities don't really equip people for the outside world, not just the general world, but it doesn't even equip them for the professional environment and the world that they're going to go in. I mean, is that another criticism you would have some sympathy with, Jim?
Well, yes. You know, I'm an employer. You know, I work I'm one of the chief officers of a business that employs 600 people. And, you know, I've moved away from stating on any kind of job description that you have to be a graduate. I don't think that's relevant. I'm more interested in understanding what people can do, and if their qualification is such, it's such. Now, I've then also been part of driving much more learning and development within work. We're paying the apprenticeship levy, so it makes sense for us to want to grow our own talent as much as recruit the talent in, ready to go, fully qualified. That's much more like the professional environment that we're seeing. We're seeing consulting companies like EY no longer, sifting on the basis of degrees. AXA, the insurance company, no longer has a graduate recruitment scheme. Whereas over in the States, Starbucks, if you've been an employee at Starbucks for over 3 months, then you can get your degree at Arizona State University paid for. And that's a completely different model, much more accessible, much more interesting model. So that environment is changing. And then within the narrow definitions of profession, I also think we now need to, we need to drive people into higher levels of learning that you'd naturally associate with higher education, but we need much more flexibility. And we need much more capacity for people to earn as they learn, rather than have to take the academic element of a qualification and then go and get work experience and then go to a professional body to qualify them. in order to practice. That is a ridiculous anachronism, and it's a sort of professional constraint on practice that's in the vested interest of the professional body because they earn fees from that, but it's not in the interest of the learners, and it's not in the interest of society.
So is that a model you go for? Would you look at dividing vocational learning from, knowledge-based learning and go back to, say, the old polytechnic model in a way, or the German vocational apprenticeship model, which seems to be working very well?
Well, in my head, you go back to the very core of what do you think universities are doing? As you said, lots of students are going into it essentially as part of a sift, part of a funnel. Well, it shouldn't be performing that function. It's a very expensive funnel at 50 grand a pop. It is an important life experience. You learn independent living. It's a rite of passage. You generate friendships that probably last you for life. Those are all really important, but they don't have to take 3 or 4 years. You can have an intensive experience. You can do that in a year, and you can then learn as you work, and then I'd love to see universities move to a subscription model so that you can then have a lifelong relationship with university, with higher education, and keep going back when you want to pivot your career, because you're going to have to change career multiple times because of what technology is doing to the world of work. And you can then get micro credentials from those universities and wrapper certification and learning mentorship services and all sorts of other things that are much more flexible, can still drive professional behaviors, can still drive professional levels of knowledge and practice, but can do so in a way that fits people's lives much more squarely than this redundant, anachronistic model that we have now.
Well, I mean, that's interesting in itself, but you talked about different types of learning, and the way that brings us to the sort of fourth industrial revolution, the artificial intelligence revolution, the digital world we're living in. Rox, has that impacted on the way students learn? I remember reading a book in the 1970s saying teachers were thinking in an analog way and students were impressionistic, intuitive in a digital way. And that was creating a conflict between teacher and learner. Do you see that happening in universities now, that students are much more into multimedia presentation of course material, and lecturers very often want to go down the old-fashioned route of writing essays? The digital revolution has opened us up to a new and different world.
Yes, I think at that parliamentary meeting that this point was raised with the professors talking about lecture capture just as an example of technology that the students wanted to use, but the universities weren't sure how you could actually incorporate that kind of freely available technology into the classrooms to help students. And there are lots and lots of other examples of that. Certainly in the professions, if you take certain technical professions, with the rise of artificial intelligence, you've got apps that can do things that human beings used to do, things that you would have done, tasks you would have done as a graduate student. So there is that tension, this open source technology, and students want to embrace it, and students feel frustrated at being limited to their access to this technology while they're at university. Yes, we think that it would massively help us if it were more integrated, if I'm answering your question correctly.
Yeah, no, you are. And I mean, that's the whole question of different pedagogies that are developing. But there's also the question, Jim, about, are universities reflecting the future world we're going to go into? Are they future-proofed in terms of robotics? It's like climate change. It's not a long way ahead. It's on us now. And are they reflecting that and equipping young people to live in a world where there's going to be a gig economy, where they will have 20 or 30 different jobs in a lifetime, in some periods where they won't have a job at all? Or are they still focusing on a world that's just gone by?
Well, there's lots of different universities, and some are doing a better job of that than others. I mean, you could argue they're preparing them for the gig economy because they're saddling them with so much debt that there are lots of students are having to go off and do lots of gig economy jobs just to survive. And maybe it's toughening them up and teaching them resilience, but I think that would be an overly generous view of that. my overall view is I think we've just scratched the surface in what we can do. A lot depends on pedagogy. A lot depends on whether or not this is university learning is about someone wise imparting content and then students absorbing that content and regurgitating it in tests at the end of the year or at the end of 3 years or whatever. Or is it about developing the collaborative intelligence, which is what in the end you need to prosper in life? You need to be able to collaborate with other humans and now with machines. And you need to be able to do so at a very intelligent way and in a way that preserves your humanity and allows you as a human to outcompete machines who are much better at recording knowledge than you will ever be. And that's quite fundamentally challenging to quite a lot of universities who have a system that is great actually for finding the next generation of academics. It's fantastic at feeding itself, but I'm not sure it's becoming as relevant for feeding the needs of the majority of the population in terms of leading fulfilled lives, both in work and in leisure.
I mean, you talk about this collaborative environment of learning, which is really important, and how collaboration in future life is important. And universities may be beginning to do that, but are they actually practicing it themselves? I mean, the new digital age, you talked about silos earlier, and in a way universities can be silos. And, there's no need. With the digital age means they can work together. They can have self-organized learning groups. Students can work from home. You can have a lecturer lecturing now using this technology to 10 different universities. In other words, there's a whole scope in the digital age for a different type of delivery system. And do you think universities are geared up to that?
Yeah, I was recently lucky enough to spend a little bit of time with a Ghanaian guy called Fred Swaneker. And Fred did well in education. He went to South Africa to work for McKinsey's, did very well with McKinsey's, and then left a few years ago to form a new higher education establishment called the African Leadership Academy. And Fred's vision was, by 2035, I think it was, 40% of the world's population will be African. And the opportunity for Africa is extraordinary if there is good leadership. And he decided to build a leadership academy to educate the top 5% of talent in Africa. And the way he is doing that, he currently has a campus in Mauritius and one in Rwanda, but he's moving away from a campus-based system to one that is much more flexible in terms of place so that it can go to people rather than have people come to it. But it's a problem-based curriculum. It's not a subject-based curriculum. So his students are learning to solve societal problems together. And he's then developing this talent, which is being lapped up by consulting companies like Bain and Boston Consulting Group and McKinsey. And he's showing all the signs of success and all the signs, crucially, of leapfrogging our Western system and creating something that works really well for his continent. And it's so exciting to see that. And I just wish we could have the open mind in order to go and learn from some of that and take some of that on. And there's a friend of mine, Ed Fido, who is starting to do that in East London. So he's building a new private university, again, with a problem-based degree that is cross-disciplinary and embracing the age of the polymath.
I mean, is that sort of flexibility something you would welcome, Rox? I mean, do you see universities very often as these silos, and that collaboration between them and having, like, Jim has mentioned, a leadership college university institution to look at one particular thing, and a lot of it, innovations like that developing is a way that something that you would welcome, something that might be the way forward?
Yes, absolutely. One of the biggest complaints that we get from young professionals and recent graduates is that my degree didn't prepare me for the real world. Now, that's if you're lucky to get some kind of position in the field that you studied in. And in the real world, you do collaborate. Things are changing. And in the construction industry, you have building information modeling. The way that you share information changes. The future of the profession is changing because of this technology. It's changing the way that we work and live. So it would be great, yes, I think, if our learning environments reflected that to better prepare us for the future, I would have thought.
And, you know, we had someone who's just come on and asked Fawa, saying, you know, should we also change the exam system and create learning outputs that are different and not just based upon examinations, because exams help to create and keep and extend the silos that you talked about, Jim?
We definitely should. There's a fantastic book by a Harvard School of Education academic called Todd Rose, which is called The End of Average. And Todd there examines standardization, standardized tests, and the sense that we all need to be compared against an average in order to benchmark ourselves, when, you know, the reality is it's now much easier and it's more credible to compare ourselves against ourselves. You know, are we getting better? Are we being stretched? Are we improving? Are we learning more? Talent analytics that employers are using will allow us, you know, be us employers or other people, to see what we can really do and understand the value that we can create in our societies, in our families, in our workplaces. We don't necessarily need this artificial hurdle of examinations. You know, Finland's one of the most successful school systems in the world. It has a set of exams at 18. That's it. Doesn't have any other public exam, and it's one of the best in the world. We need to challenge all of these things. We need to really question what the role of an examination is. If I'm going to a doctor, yes, I kind of really do want to know that they've got the knowledge, and they're not relying on YouTube and Google. So I think there are some areas where you do want to test that there is enough basic foundation of knowledge for someone to be able to practice. But for many other things, we don't need the exam. We need the assessment of an expert who can observe, as you do in a music grading exam or a dance grading or a drama grading exam. You have an expert assessor who observes what level that person is performing at and gives an expert subjective assessment.
Yeah, we actually did a meeting in Conway Hall, and we brought in via Skype the ex-Minister of Education from Finland. So we learned a lot about their system, which was, you know, really enlightening for a lot of people. So, I mean, if we were to make some major changes, because we're getting close to the end of the interview now, and if you were to make sort of 1 to 3 recommendations for major change, what would yours be, Roxy?
I think all the points you made today are very valid. I think we need to go back and look at the courses students are taking and why, and then that can inform our decisions. And we need not to forget international students, and we need not to forget EU students, why they travel abroad to take the courses that they do, whether they're humanities, art, vocational, and then look to understand what we actually need from those courses to make those changes. I think for me, that's the most important thing.
Okay, so that's the most important thing for you. And Jim, what would be the things that you would change if you were given the portfolio of education again?
I would want to challenge the vice chancellors of our universities as to whether or not they have the right business model that really serves the needs of learning, or whether they're just self-serving for them as academic communities. I would be asking our policymakers whether or not they have started thinking about what an education system would look and feel like if we didn't have qualifications, if we were using analytics instead. And I would be asking questions of our teaching workforce, which is crucial, because as much as I believe in technology and the power of technology, we need to enhance the workforce with technology, not replace them. But the workforce also need to ask themselves the same sorts of questions. Are they really meeting the needs of learners? Are they wrapping education around each individual? Or are they organizing them to serve their needs as the producers of the service? And then I'd be very interested in that.
Okay, I think we're losing you. We sort of had a bit of dropout then. So let me sort of finally ask you both, and particularly Rox, because you belong to, or you started Education Beyond the Borders. People wanted to learn more about what you were doing and take that forward. How do they get in touch with you?
The best way is to find us on Facebook at the moment. We're Educating Beyond Borders. And you can reach us, send us messages there. We do have a website as well, but the best way right now is via Facebook.
Okay, so Facebook, and if anybody wants to contact you, Jim, I guess would they do that through your parliamentary email?
Yes, if they go to the parliamentary website, they can find me and send me an email, and I welcome all the feedback.
Okay, yeah, and it's easy to do, parliament.uk, if you go to that and you
That's right.
tap all the MPs and members.
Yeah, I mean, the email address is knightja@parliament.uk.
Okay, so if anybody wants to follow that up, please do. Anyhow, I mean, this is a discussion that could go on and on, because we've only just touched the surface and there's so much that we could talk through, and maybe we'll follow this up with more webinars and more discussion. But thank you both for coming on and for doing this. It's been great, and I'm glad, Rox, you made it on at the end at the last minute, but better late than never you got there, which is great. So thank you both.
Thanks, Francis.
And it's been,
thanks very much.
It's been
Bye-bye.
a great webinar, so we'll stop this webinar now.